Why did you get the Mustang?
I want to show that I made it. I wanted to show that like I wasn't going to be driving around in something like what my mother had at the time was like a Geo Metro, little huevo. We used to call it little egg car.
A huevo car.
So I wanted to have a car with air conditioning. I wanted to show that I come up with power windows and had that level of prestige. And oh look, they can hear that engine. Hey, that's Carlos. Hey, that's what's up, man. Hey, but at the same time, not too far afterwards, hey, can you jump? Get any battery cables?
Buenas. My name is Manny Vasquez.
And I'm Barbara Robles.
We are two proud first generation graduates who made it through college and are now carving our paths as investors, entrepreneurs, and mentors. We started this video podcast to have an honest, down to earth conversations with our first gen community. What does it mean to be first gen? Well, it means you're first in your family to attend and or graduate college. Why are we doing a video podcast? Well, if you're first gen and it feels like there is no community out there for you, right? There's no community where realmente encajas. Well, hopefully this podcast is for you. Today, we have an inspiring guest joining us, Carlos Constancio. Carlos grew up in San Antonio, Texas, attending Madison High School before furthering his education at St. Philip's Community College and the University of Incarnate Word. As the first in his family to attend college, he earned a bachelor's degree in information systems and went on to achieve an MBA in data analytics. Carlos is now making waves as a lead governance advisor at a top-tier bank and insurance company. Beyond his professional accomplishments, he's a devoted husband and proud father of two beautiful daughters with whom he shares his passions for professional wrestling and smart investing. Now, let's jump into a conversation with the one and only Carlos Constancio, also known as Spurs Bane. All right, Carlos, what is this whole Spurs Bane thing about? Tell everybody what Spurs Bane is.
So Spurs Bane started off some years ago back in when the Spurs won in 2014, and they had the championship ceremony where they were giving out the rings. A buddy of mine was telling me, "Dude, you look like Spurs, like you look like Bane. You should go to the Spurs game dressed as Bane." I was like, "Nah, I don't really watch that stuff. Not my thing." Well, anyways, we played a game of Madden. He said, "If you win, I'll buy the mask. Will you wear it if I buy it?" I said, "All right, fine." All right, I won, and we ended up. I ended up going to the game with my wife. My daughter at the time, was maybe 2, 3 years old, so they were dressed as like Batgirls. I was Bane, and I didn't think too much about it. But the next thing you know, everybody's coming up to me asking for photos. It started to become its own bit of a fandom, and began going to games more. Started learning the quotes for Bane himself from the movie Dark Knight Rises with Batman, and then really got to the point where I became a Fiesta medal, and sold those at 1 year, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of experiences. I still sometimes go out like that to Comic Cons and cosplays, but it was really a way to stretch. Well, at the time, for me, having a lot of machismo, didn't think it would be something I would want to do. Now you can't get me out of it, so it's been a lot of fun since.
Cool. So, for the people who don't know out there, Carlos and I and Barbara, we've been friends and we've known each other for some time now. But I wanted to share who Carlos is a little bit. But today's topic of conversation is on buying dumb things. Okay. So, today, like I mentioned, one of the things that we're looking to cover in these podcasts is the topic of money. Money is something that we all struggle with and we have to learn our way through, but especially when you're first gen, right? It's a difficult thing to navigate or to learn about. And one of those things is just learning how not to buy dumb things. So to kind of kick off this conversation, Carlos, I'd be interested in you sharing with us what's the dumbest thing that you've ever bought and how did you feel about it now? And what did you learn from that experience?
Great question. I think it's timely because right now everything you hear about is with cryptos, NFTs, Bitcoin, all this type of thing taking place with everything we're hearing right now with the recent election announcements. And the reason I'm bringing that part up is because at the time in 2021, and Manny and Barbara were hearing me talk about it. Oh, cryptos, NFTs, and I really got into what's called FOMO, fear of missing out. And I fell into that level of urgency and really felt like, man, this is the time, this is the time, this is the time. and really overspent. And I had to sit there, and as the markets crashed, and had to sit there and own the fact, like, oh, there was one thing I had to really reflect on that I lost sight of, which was in 1 year, it you're not going to see a lot of change. It's over 10 years that you're going to see differences. It takes I got that urgency. I had to slow it down and really reflect on the fact that, you know what, it's still a big plan. Things obviously are back and improving and overall, but it really helped to bring me back to the fundamentals of where in that short time frame, there's no shortcuts in life or in anything, especially when it comes to your finances. And just as much as it is about gains, as much as it is about preserving. So I take that lesson to not only apply to anything that comes up as a level of interest from whether it be in entrepreneurial opportunities, investing, or just things overall, is that take your time, be meticulous, be patient, and own your mistakes, because it's also part of your journey and where you can end up celebrating at the end.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That sounds like someone who like is really mature and already learned their lesson and is into investing. But I'm talking about the Carlos that I know, that Barbara knows, that likes to buy monitos and likes to buy
Which one?
drones.
Like that one?
That's
This little
what's
guy.
right. So I guess my question is getting to like, okay, in your journey as first gen, you might have all got your first big paycheck, right? Or you're in college and you got your first job, wherever that may be, um, and you're buying stuff for the very first time. You have your own money, and maybe your emotions got the best of you and you buy things and you really don't think about it too much, and maybe you bought a big thing. For some folks it's like buying a sports car, right? Like that's like the whole thing that everybody thinks about, right? Well, I didn't say everybody, but like men, right? There's this stereotype that we want to get like the sports car straight out of like our first job. So something like that, like what was your version of that growing up?
Actually, I got one right in line with that. It was a 1991 LX, which at the time it was already a bit older, but even then, I was so set on getting that kind of sports car as convertible. It was all the things that I wanted it to be, and I was still working. I'm at fast food restaurants, and I wasn't like I was making a lot of money, but at the same time, it was a symbol of me being able to have that prestige on the streets. I'd be able to have my loud car, loud system. So what did I do? I rushed and I got a car from a car dealership, high interest rates, high loan, payments. Car insurance was through the roof. And oh, hey, by the way, I didn't really check the quality of the Mustang itself. It wasn't like it was running perfect. So as soon as a few weeks out the gate, the top wasn't working. It was already struggling. It was getting leaks on the edge, and transmission was already a bit janky. And so I was already confronted with all these different things that I didn't consider, and I was on the hook. I was committed. I signed that paperwork. I didn't do my due diligence on researching. I fell into that urgency. And it's something that I look back on in similar fashion when it comes to cars. That while it might be good of that moment, that symbol of like, man, this is fun, this is good. I'll tell you, to this day, one of the cars that I've got right now, my wife has got the family car with a 2014 Acadia with the kids. Even that one's older, but I'll even raise it one level up. I've got an '02 Suburban as a car that I drive, because no car payments or no anything. As much as I can get away from the car payments now is where I put my focus, because in the end, it's about freeing up that money.
So how much did you pay for that car, that
Oh,
first car you were talking about?
it must have been at the time maybe like 12,000, 13,000, something like that. Which at the time,
Wow.
it was. You're talking about car payments of like maybe 400 or 500 a month. And again, I'm working at a fast food restaurant. It's not like I'm working at Sonic. I'm not making enough money to sit there and cover a lot of these bills. But here I was. The best thing I was able to ever do was look at the Mustang sitting in the parking lot, in the driveway of the fast food at the drive-through, because I was spending all my time working. I didn't have time to do anything else. I didn't have time to drive it, time to maintain it. I was spending all my time working to take care of that car payment.
What do you think was the motivator? Like, let's be honest, let's be real. Like, Why did you get the Mustang? Like, why? What was the burning thing
I mean,
inside you
come
that says I
on,
need?
let's. I want to show that I made it. I wanted to show that uh, I wasn't going to be driving around in something like what my mother had at the time was like a Geo Metro. So there were times before that I was going around with a little Geo Metro, little Wevo. We used to call it little egg car, with 3 cylinders.
A huevo car.
The Wevo car, and I was like, nah, man, I want to make sure I had my old Buick Regals that I had paid cash for, but before then I had little lowriders and whatnot, but they never had any air conditioning, so I wanted to have a car with air conditioning. I wanted to show that I come up with power windows and had that level of prestige and symbolism and making sure that whether it be homeboys or anybody else that I'm going to be rolling up with, I'll be looking cool, man. They'll be like, oh look, they can hear that engine. Hey, that's Carlos. Hey, that's what's up, man. Hey, but at the same time, not too far afterwards, hey, can you jump? Got any battery cables? I don't know. All right, help me out.
Mine was a little bit similar. I got my first car
Uh
with student loans, the money that I got from student loans. And I'm
huh.
like, I
See,
could
don't
have
worry,
purchased something that was a little bit cheaper and like paid it cash, but no,
because you have more to
rack up
work
those
with.
student loans. Exactly.
But see, I got my stereo system with I got my Alpines and my JL Audio 12s with the Pell Grant.
Oh my God.
If only the trio funded programs knew that that's what where students are using the federal
That's
funds
right,
for.
man.
but but I mean, let's be plain spoken about it. You bought it because you were trying to be cool. You were trying to be cool, look cool in front of your friends, wanted to feel cool, wanted to have that moment of being cool. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. It, call it whatever it is. That's what it is. I made the mistake too. I bought a motorcycle because I was trying to be cool and win a girl over, right? Like you just letting your emotions make the decisions on how you buy things, right? Not thinking with your head, but thinking with your ego or your emotions, whatever it might be. So, I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing from you, right? Is it was all about being cool.
Oh yeah, it was definitely in the moment because there's no long term view. There's no 5 year plan. There's not even a 1 year plan necessarily. It's the weekend plans. That's about as far as it went.
Day by day plan.
Day by day. That's it. Especially with gas, it costs like $5 to get me half a tank back then.
Totally get it. I'm with you. I'm on the same boat. So, how do you decide if something is worth spending money on now, like that you learned? Do you have like a mental like checklist or a specific rule that you follow or anything?
For sure. And right now is y'all mentioned at the beginning. Now I've got 2 daughters. I've got one that's 12 years old and one that's 8, getting ready to turn 9 years old. The first thing I ask myself is, will this help my family? Will this be something that's going to benefit them short term or long term? And as I go through that thought process, then I decide, whether or not through that checklist as you're asking about, is this something that I need to get right now? Or is this something that, we know, for example, I'll take even, we'll call it market cycles for things that we want to buy, meaning we know that there's Black Friday coming up. I know we're doing this right now, right before Black Friday. Is it something we can get when it's going to be at the right time to buy or clearance or like out of season? And if it's not urgent, then do we really, have the time to find maybe something else to compare it to? If it helps them, great. Or if it helps me, of course, that's the main driver. But I've got to hold true to that part first because one, if I don't, they'll remind me, hey, how come you got this and not this for the family? Like, well, what happened was they had the Superman, right? This little monito was
Yeah.
like on sale, and you got to do it.
Let me tell you what Ready makes me do. Okay, if I go to a store, I'm like, oh my God, I really want this shirt or whatever. He's like, yeah, sure, grab it. And then we're walking around and stuff. And then by the end, he's like, you're gonna get, I'm like, no, I don't think I want it anymore. I don't think I like it. And then later on, I learned that that's a tactic that you walk around the store with the item that you want. And I'm like, this is what he's been doing to me this whole time. Like, I don't need it anymore.
Yeah, it's a mental hack. Once you have it, once it's in your hand, the whole like joy and adrenaline rush and honeymoon stage of having it goes away, and you start really, yeah, you start thinking like do I really need it? Like without really, because now you start thinking, okay, at the end of this, walking around Target or Walmart, do I really want to spend the 20, 30, 40 bucks on this thing? Or have I already gotten over the fact of having it in my hand? That's a thing for me. I don't know if it's a thing for you or if you practice something similar.
Actually, that's a good point and a great example because Aaliyah, my youngest, will have. She loves to look at books when we go to Sam's, especially because they have like all the books right there, and she wanted to do the same thing. Well, to that same thought, as I would sit there and be like, "Well, just have a couple." I was like, "Which ones do you like?" Okay, read them while we're here, and and so while we're going around, she's reading Blue's Clues, and so on. I'm like, okay, if you really like the book, and I'll show her on the phone where you can get like the half price books, and I go, look, this is how much it costs right there. I was like, you can get it for $1.50. You get three of them for $6, whatever it's going to be, depending on the type of book that she's looking at. I go, if you really want it, we can get it from there, or we can walk around the store one more time. I was like, but that's as far as it's going to go.
Walk around one more time so you can finish that chapter.
Yeah, like finish the chapter, we'll get it, but that's one way that works for her. With my older daughter, it's now it's makeup and all that kind of thing. And I'm like, they got like a trial size or anything.
Well, that's cool. Well, it's interesting because you're telling me that like your family is now kind of your sounding board for a lot of your decisions, a lot of purchasing decisions. That's, yeah, and I think that's normal, right, for a lot of us, especially growing up. But what I find fascinating is like when we first get to college or get the Pell Grant or get whatever financial aid we get. It's the first time we get like a big lump sum of money, right? We've never had a big lump sum of money, and there is this weird feeling. I don't know if you guys had this feeling where like I'm gonna treat myself. Like I've never had this much. Like I need to live life now. I'm at this point in my life where like I want to spend money and other people around me are spending money. I don't have it, but I have this at the time you don't think of it as borrowed money. You're just like I have this money. And so you spend it frivolously, whether that be a car or a PlayStation or a camera or whatever. But there's this weird thing of like never having it and then justifying that like dumb purchase at that moment in time. Is that something that goes through your head where you justify why you should have that dumb thing to yourself because you've never had it? Is that like a dialogue that went through your mind when you were first like having money that was substantial, that was bigger than just like a couple of bucks?
Totally, that happened for a while, especially with like even shoes or clothes. I normally would have to buy things at the flea market. I have to get the knockoff brands and the cheap materials, and I started to realize, well, hold on a minute, I can get not only one pair of Jordans at the time, I can get as many as I want. I had been so used to wearing just a few outfits, not only for a couple of weeks, but throughout the years. And so to start to finally have a chance to get like a whole wardrobe of things that fit, that didn't have holes in them, that didn't weren't faded, didn't have stains, were legit brands. I went through that phase of getting a lot of the shoes and getting a lot of the gear that I felt like I was never able to get because it was something that I had fixated on throughout the years, and then I finally had my chance. And then I had to catch myself and realize like, okay, I can't have light blue, navy blue, sky blue, all that kind of maroon, bright red, light red, green, all that kind of thing. It was a bridge too far of like having to go down that path. And then I really asked myself, well, what am I doing here? And I'm no longer in that stage. And what else could I be putting my money to that's going to give me a better return than just sitting in the closet with me staring at it, trying to figure out, I wonder what goes with that lime green.
I don't know if that has to do with growing up poor or what it is, right? But it's like going from a scarcity mentality, like I've never had it. Now I get an opportunity to have it. And then you go way too far on the other end of that spectrum. You're like, well, now I'm going to buy everything. And then you almost go broke buying everything that you want, right? And then you have to you got to bring it back to something that is more reasonable. The thing that like pushes us in that direction and then us having to bring us back to like a center that is more acceptable for us in the long term, right? To say, okay, I can't be the guy that has the coolest Jordans, the rest of my life. At the age of 60, nobody cares what kind of Jordans you have. It's more about your health care and life care at that point.
Now it's about New Balance shoes, and I gotta help my feet.
I see it more like because I think we all grew up the same way, right? Like we didn't have much, and then we had a little bit. We wanted to just have everything. I think it's not having the practice that you're always limited, or you didn't even know that you could get all these things, and you don't have the practice or even the thought that you need a plan about the future. Like there's no future; it's a today type of experience, and you're just enjoying that experience at that moment without thinking what's going to happen tomorrow. Like, hey, maybe I shouldn't spend all of my student loan money in a car when I still have to pay for my classes, down the line. So I don't think there's that practice or mentality of thinking about the future.
Yeah, and it's a good point because it's not common around you. At least for me, like I didn't have like, I'm the youngest of seven boys, but I didn't have any of them telling me about like, you need to have a savings account, you need to have any of these type of things. Nobody told me about these things. I didn't have that understanding it was even a thing. The only thing I even learned eventually was when I was working at Olive Garden. I was waiting tables and they gave me options to buy with like 20% or 25% less than what the price point was each quarter, and I didn't understand what that meant. I didn't know what that even related to. It just sounded fancy because I saw it on a couple of movies, I think Wall Street and whatever it was at the time, and yet it didn't seem like something that was attainable or at least relevant to me because all I knew was what was coming up that weekend, and I needed to fix that Mustang. I needed to get that new CD. I needed to get that new look, and being able to see just how much bigger this world is and how much larger of opportunities are out there was not even real to me because of a couple of mental barriers at the same time, believing that it was something I deserved, I had within my control, had within my reach. And then the other part was just, especially back then, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have Google, we didn't have anything but maybe like old AOL, connecting to the internet. That's all we had back then. So being able to acquire that knowledge or making it to where it was something that you can actually do wasn't real. But those new rims are real.
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing two things, right? So, like, I'm hearing for Barbara that because we don't grow up in environments, being first gen, growing up poor, and you don't grow up in environments where there's a constant conversation or practice and thinking about the long term relative to the near term, which is the right now, like the rims or the car or the nice clothes, that kind of works against us sometimes, right? Because we're living in the here and now. I got a little bit of money, I got to enjoy it now. And I think the other thing I'm hearing from Carlos is saying like understanding that there's a bigger world outside of just the Jordans, just the car. And once you understand that there's a bigger world, it makes the Jordans or the clothes or the car or the rims like small compared to, wait, I could have this very cool big thing that's called like a business that could buy me all the things that I want, or an investment that could like buy me the freedom that I want away from a 9 to 5. You're like thinking bigger than just that weekend, bigger than just looking cool, but you've never had the opportunity to see the world bigger than just your backyard, bigger than just the conversations around your family or community that may be just about those smaller things. I don't want to call them smaller in terms of like minimizing them. It's just like we don't have practice being in communities that have bigger conversation about bigger things, which then once again you just fall back to what you know, which is like talk about the here and now and the things that are tangible and give you an immediate feeling of goodness, right? Like, oh man, it feels nice to wear like this nice clothes and yada yada yada. So
So, I mean, I think we should be grateful that we can actually acknowledge, right, what we've experienced. And I think our generation had the opportunity to have our own level of success, right, to acknowledge that. But if I go back to see my parents, they're still going through that, right? They're still thinking, I'm going to get this phone because I need it. Why do you need it now? You don't need a phone. Like the one you have is just fine. No, but this is like the nicer one. I'm like, yes, but you don't need it. And we try to like be like our parents, trying to help them understand that those are just little things. Like let's spend it or invest it in something bigger. But we can't blame them, right? They're in a stage in their life where we kind of have to be a little bit more flexible and understanding. But then we're still being really hard on ourselves, right? To not fall into that again. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting. For example, my mom is still going through that.
Yeah, and the different generations have different challenges, and then we, as each generation learns from the other, how things just come together where it brings to light of like, you know what, like there's more out there. There's something that is more than just what we see as our direct family, our direct environment. Sometimes we don't know, but it also comes back to like making it tangible, making it real. Because back to that thing is with the numbers is when you look back and we hear about it all the time, like if you spent or invested and saved $5 a week ever since we were like 12 or 13 years old at the time, it doesn't seem like much of anything, but over the duration of years and decades, it's so much. But we're taught in many ways to just take care of the fundamentals, take care of the basics, like just worry about today. And I remember my mom always, it's okay, mijo, it's okay, it'll work out, we're fine, we're fine. And you're like, it will be okay, all right. All right, well, I want these Cerwin Vegas, and then I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm like looking around trying to get these next things. Back to peer pressure and society. We have certain challenges at different ages of self-esteem, acceptance, fitting in, and trying to find our way. But we have a tendency to find our way through kind of aligning to what we see other people doing. Even though everybody's doing the same rat race. Everybody's buying it because of the other person, but the other person's buying it because of you. And then with family is just like, you know what? Be there for each other. You just be there, worry about what you can do at the moment, and don't think further than that.
Yeah, no, it's hard. To Barbara's point about like having to almost coach our parents, right, on something you've learned that they've never had the opportunity to learn, right? Because they're too busy busting their ass trying to get you the opportunity to go to school and put food on the table. But now you have to go back and be like, you don't need that thing. And to your point, Carlos, is like, how do we make these bigger opportunities that they've never heard of tangible so that they understand that investing is more valuable than the iPhone, right? And let me show you what that looks like. Those are really hard. Just like you're bridging. I always tell people, do you know how hard it is to be first gen, especially when it comes to money? Because you're having to bridge in two directions. One, like one generation behind you, right? Your parents. And then one generation forward because you have your kids. And they don't understand like the leap that you had to make to be able to offer that kind of life. And so that is really difficult. And then you have that inner dialogue where like you're trying not to have a scarcity mentality. You can have some things, right? You can enjoy some things in moderation. It's just a constant dialogue of like, don't swing the pendulum this far this way and buy dumb things because you've never had them. But at the same time, no seas un codo, right? And allow yourself to live today and have things, but make sure that the things that truly matter to you. Like for Barbara and I now, kind of sharing with my family now, her mom and my parents, like the beauty of traveling and how that's like an amazing gift relative to buying things. And they're finally getting it, like, oh man, that's cool, seeing other worlds, seeing other things. And that's something that you can't, to your point of making it tangible, you can't just like, oh man, see, you can, instead of buying that $1,000 iPhone, you could have traveled to Mexico City and had some amazing tacos. Right? It's like, yeah, whatever. But the iPhone has AI. Right? It's like okay, cool. But then when you show it to them, you're like, wow. And so the whole being first gen and growing up poor makes it that much more difficult to not buy dumb things, I feel, because you don't have that constant reminder of like, yeah, you want that thing, but what if it was that thing or this other thing? Or what if you could have that thing, but maybe 5 years down the line when to you it's worth an hour of your time instead of 10 hours at Sonic, working at Sonic, right? We didn't have that. I guess that's what makes it hard to not fall in the buying dumb stuff trap.
Yeah, well, I'm going to use that example about the family dynamic because with my daughters, I'm like, again, I'm the youngest of 7 boys, so having daughters is like a whole new ball game to me. Meaning, with the little, whimpering eyes and feeling like, I know, no, okay.
Just this time.
Just this time. I had to find this balance, and it definitely didn't happen overnight. But I was like, to that same thought, I'm like, I don't want them to come across feeling like they're constrained, but I also don't want them to feel like we
are rich. Just say it's
that we have all, like it's limitless. So I had to find a balance of leveraging the opportunity as a teachable moment, saying, this is how these things, function. This is how the world operates. And I want you to see how it connects. And so I would give them the money, but then they would have to feel that pain of having to give it to pay. And all of a sudden it was very different when it was their money. When it was their money, they had a certain level of ownership as it came to that decision. And they would not, be as so freedom to make that same kind of purchase. And then they still give me the look, and many times I still end up buying it, But it was there was eventually a lesson along the way. But the other piece to add to it was going to be about what you said, man, is experiences. Really using that as the driving force behind what things make sense to actually go for, because you can always get that new pair of shoes, a new gear, whatever it's going to be, new car, new whatever it is. You have to really find a balance of, well, what about that unique moment where you have family around to be able to go across those trips and have those family, traveling moments. And having, for me as kids, as y'all may know, like just recently, keep in mind my daughters are, the little ballerinas. They do, piano. They do all those kind of things. But all of a sudden, you said earlier at the very beginning, I watch wrestling. Next thing you know, like they gravitate to it. And a couple years ago, and then we got to the point with it for my oldest birthday. She was born around WrestleMania, and she wanted to go to WrestleMania for her birthday. And I'm like, does she really want to do that? And which is awesome. Obviously, there's a cost to it, but the fact of the matter was, that experience, even to this day, they want to watch the same WrestleMania we went to. They want to watch it on the weekend, and they're like, we were there, and that has like a resonating utility, if you would, forever. It's going to be something they'll remember forever through those experiences, through that travel. And that's something that you can't like have as a tangible thing to hold in your hand, but it'll be forever in their minds and forever in all of our minds. And I also felt like at that age, they may not be in a wrestling forever. They may not be in a wrestling, the very next year. Just like with Disney World or things like that, it's capturing that time. It's a timely decision, knowing that you can't replicate that, because even with my parents are 84 and 83, so having those moments to be able to go through with it while that's still something that could be done with all of the ones that I love, that's where I will have that factor into my decision. Still be a balance, meaning when we get back, we're going to have, some ramen noodles. We're going to have, some of the other things that we sacrifice. But now that they see, well, wait, because they're already asking about next year. I'm like, well, if you want to go do that, we have to let go of some of these other things in order to get there.
There's trade-offs. There's trade-offs. You're teaching them trade-offs.
Yes, and now they're like totally all about it, because it's exactly with y'all's example. Now they're like, oh, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Like it's so easy to make sacrifices to get the bigger gain.
Yeah, it's the difference between buying an experience, which will last forever in your memories, versus buying a thing that probably will last you X amount of months or years, right? If it really lasts, and teaching them that. But when you grow up poor, there's no concept of those two things. I think there's just like, hey, I don't have enough to buy things I want. Let's just start there. When you grow up super poor, I know that I need new tires. I know that I need these things, right? And so you go from buying things to never really understanding, when you have a little bit of money, making a choice between things and experiences is a whole nother exercise you've never been introduced to. So when you finally get introduced to it, for us in this conversation, further down in our lives, after we already made mistakes buying dumb stuff, we're like, dang, man. And if someone would have taught me that, like, I'm a little bit jealous. Barbara and I just came back from a 5-day hiking trip in Peru. I'm a little bit jealous of some European couple that took a sabbatical from work, and they're just traveling all these countries, like buying little bit of food here, a little bit of food there. They're not going extravagant on any of their trip. That is so effing awesome. So if I had to trade like a car or my motorcycle or my first English bulldog that was like $2,000 or $3,000 for a trip of a lifetime the way they're doing it, I would have done that. But in my mind, I never knew that those two things were on the table for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so that's what I'm trying. That's yet another thing it sounds like that we're hitting on here is, we buy dumb stuff sometimes because nobody else is telling me what's the other thing that's on the table that you could be getting with your money, that you could be trading. And so sometimes we just buy that dumb thing because that's the thing that's on the table. Nobody's ever explained to me that there's other things you could have on the table.
Yes, back to the example, and obviously you're going to hear a lot of my examples with the kids because it's what's happening with me right now. Is they will see a toy, they'll see something at a store, and I'll have them, say like they'll be like, "Oh, I want this, I want this." Like, are you sure? I was like, just hang on to it and see if there's anything else. And even with Amazon, like if it's on Amazon, I'll just put in the cart, but look around, look and make sure. And I'll give them some examples. Like, did you know that you, instead of getting two of those little blind boxes, like these little packs that you don't know what little monitos are in there, versus saying, but if you're going to buy two of those, you could end up using that same amount of money to get a better quality toy. Like to get something that you're going to use every day versus something you're just going to use that I'm going to step on the dogs and we eat. Like being able to understand, like those are the types of trade-offs back to that same, decision making that they have to really hone in on. And so they'll do that now, and I'll hear them say it on their own. Like, hold on, did we go over here? Did we look at Walmart? Or is there anything coming up for right now, like Black Friday? So they're already thinking through that thought process of not just that moment, that button, that what's in my hand, but to that bigger, broader picture of I've got options and I can see a better way to get the most value out of what it is that I am going to get versus just being straight up urgent and trying to get it at the moment.
So, Carlos, what would be your final thoughts? Like, if you wanted to share a piece of advice or just something to one of our first generation peeps out there in the community, like, what would you say to them?
Sure.
When it
And
comes to buying dumb stuff.
when it comes to buying dumb stuff, I mean, one bigger picture, pause, think to yourself, what could I get not only with that trade off of that same amount of money, but what could I get bigger, broader picture that I'm going to actually, what I'll compare with a want is going to be, something like symbolism. I think a lot of what we talked about is like symbols and projecting and really just kind of conveying like something along in society. What can I buy that's going to be a solution to my car, a battery, a bill, a debt, an option to get my health better, something that's going to be a way to be actionable in your solution towards your bigger goal. If you're right now your first time generation student, you got bigger games in mind. You're not done. You're just getting started. You don't even really know like how big and broad this world can be, but you do know you want to experience it. So are you going to be able to make that decision at the moment to realize that there's a much bigger picture in the game at play? That jewelry, that outfit, that phone is not going to give you those things. Those will fade. Everybody's garage is full of them. There's, wastelands full of those kind of things. But what you can do is say, is this going to get me to my next step? Is this going to get me to my bigger game, my bigger goal, my graduation? Visualize being on stage. Visualize getting a diploma. Visualize maybe you do need another laptop. Maybe you do need a better backpack. Maybe you do need something that's going to make you more effective as a student, more effective as an employee, more effective as just a person. Think about those things and drive that first. And I'm going to give an example of something I remember back in the day, back to a car, is, through the neighborhoods I grew up in, I would see a car running through the neighborhood and they might have the nicest looking chrome deep dish rims and clean looking tires and loudest sound system, but it wouldn't have a paint job. It wouldn't have locks on the door. The air conditioner wouldn't work. The dude, I'm guaranteeing you, didn't have health insurance. What I mean by this is that priorities. While he may have felt like he had the best looking car because he was thinking about the weekend, the reality was he was skipping all the things that mattered most in life. His health, the actual functional purpose of a car, just getting the most value out of the money that he was using. He was putting it all on that projection of symbolism of trying to fit into society and not finding solutions to his bigger goal.
Well, thanks for that, Carlos. You always give us these very good pieces of wisdom. But no, I sincerely appreciate A, your time, but B, kind of sharing a little bit about where your head was at when you were buying dumb stuff. I mean, we covered a lot, growing up poor, over indexing, going too far into like buying what we always wanted because we've never had it. We talked about trade-offs. We talked about making sure that the thing that you're buying is something that's going to last forever, not just buying the cheapest thing. And then also talked about like experiences and how buying experiences over things is a new concept that if you grew up poor and you're first gen, there's a good chance you've never even knew that that was on the table for you to trade and have a trade off. So we covered a lot. It doesn't seem like it, and we're probably going to get better at kind of chunking up what these lessons are. But what I did want I just wanted to have a fluid conversation, which we did successfully. I'm sure I'm going to invite you back because there's a lot of mistakes you've made that I think other people can
Oh
learn
yeah,
from.
you know, this is a. You mean this isn't like a full season of worth of content? I'm ready. I've got it.
We'll have seasons with your mistakes, Manny's mistakes, my mistakes.
There you go. Yeah, we're guaranteeing to never get hired by anybody else. Really.
But there's so much that like benefits from the conversations that in the end, back to like you were saying, and Barbara, like we all got the mistakes, we all have these challenges, and it's normal, it's expected, and it's encouraged to be vulnerable and share it because um, there's not a person out there that hasn't gone through something similar in one form or fashion. And it's through the community and through learning from each other that you can end up getting stronger to get to that next step. It's through locking arms and going up that mountain, going up that hill. And trust me, even after having all the funds, having this money, as you call it, it ends up not being this groundbreaking, life-changing experience. There's so much more to what you have in your own journey and in all of ours that it's not about the money. It's not about the money. It's about doing the things that matter the most, like helping each other, like helping others, and really highlighting the fact that the journey is what it's all about. It's not going to be some end game goal that once you get there, it's done. It never ends, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, this
Good
hopefully
deal.
will help people acknowledge, right? Because I think when we were going through it, we had nothing really to help us acknowledge what was happening or what decisions we were making. Like nobody, you can have YouTube, like you said, the internet to be aware of these things. And as we talk about it more, hopefully it'll help others.
As I know I tell y'all off camera, but I want to say like for real, like this is something that I really love and admire that y'all do this, to being able to like stay consistent throughout the years on pushing, on growing that entrepreneurial strength in order to get that message out. Because the only reason I'm here having this conversation is because of the journey that both of you have committed to doing. Both of you have made that decision to just not let up. Whether it's going to be living in a van, on the other side of the country, whether it's going to be, going across the world, or continuously watching Manny work through the process of learning how to use Bose headphones on a Mac.
That was such an experience.
Thanks for coming together. No, I appreciate it. But that concludes our first ever first gen platicas. And if anybody ever wants to reach out to you, Carlos, how can they reach out to you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, of course, Carlos Constancio, and then I think that's probably just going to be the easiest way to find me. I've got the Instagram, _Carlos Constancio, but I've not been updating and doing anything there. Best one's get me on LinkedIn.